But now to introduce our proceedings, I'm going to ask John Denham to speak. John is the chair of the all-party group on Hazara in Parliament, and we've held several meetings under his distinguished chairmanship, and I'm going to ask him to address you now.
Thank you. Eric, thank you very much indeed for that introduction and for all the work that you've done on this issue. I chair the Hazara all-party parliamentary group, as you've heard, and let me just set the scene of our involvement. Our group formed through a very sort of traditional parliamentary process in that a number of members of parliament were approached by our constituents, members of the Hazara diaspora living in our constituencies, who raised the plight, particularly the Hazaras in Quetta, with us. And I have said at a number of these meetings, I was not the only one who had little or no knowledge of what was going on. Indeed, perhaps had occasionally seen a headline of a terrorist attack and no idea about the context. And since then we've had a number of debates in Parliament and raised issues with ministers and with officials to try to get more of a spotlight on what is happening. Let me say that we've highlighted the plight of the Hazaras because these are the people who have spoken to us and made us aware of their particular plight, and because of the peculiar intensity of the attacks that have taken place over 10 years or more in Quetta. We don't in any way want to divide the plight of the Hazaras off from the rest of the Shia community, or indeed the other communities in Pakistan that have been suffering from terrorism, which is why we were so delighted to ask to co-chair, co-sponsor this particular event. The appalling attack on Sahar always leaves us, I think, feeling that when something as dreadful as this takes place, there has to be some way of turning a terrible event into something that can possibly bring us some sense of progress, some sort of international response. And I think that's where we need to go away from tonight, with a sense of some of the things that need to be done. Because there is no doubt that there is far too little international attention to the terrorism that is being waged in Pakistan, far too little understanding of what is happening, and far too little international focus on doing something about it. Eric just referred a moment ago to the understanding the ideology and the roots of the terrorism. I'm afraid we have a long history of recognizing threats far too late, and when situations become far too intractable, and then in the world we try to respond too late, and often ways that don't necessarily make things better and can make things worse. And that seems to me to be what's happening here. If we wake up and find that what is going on in Pakistan has in any way been consolidated with what is happening in IS and becomes part of that wider picture, then getting back from where we are will be a lot harder even than it seems today. I won't go through the grim statistics. We will all know that in the recent Global Terrorism Report, Pakistan was one of the top 4 countries for international terrorist incidents in 2013. The 2 Hazara bombings were actually the 3rd and 4th worst terrorist incidents in 2013, which gives us some sense of the scale of what is going on. I would suggest that if there's any possible way of trying to get some good out of what has happened, there are 3 areas where we need to look. The first is the responsibility of the Pakistan government and state itself. Others can speak about other parts of the victimization of the Shias in Pakistan, but it is absolutely the case in Quetta that those who are responsible for these acts publicly declare their intention to do them and claim responsibility for them. The individuals are named and are known to associate with other political and state figures, and the political wings are openly able to hold demonstrations and rallies to celebrate what they've been doing. There is no mystery about who is behind it. The failure to bring a single person to justice, since the attack started in, I think, 1999, is quite extraordinary. Even when people have been arrested, they have been released, they have escaped from apparently secure custody or whatever it might be. And I don't think that we can in any way absolve the Pakistan authorities from responsibility for the failure to act. Yes, the situation is difficult. Yes, tackling terrorism is not easy. We had our own long history of terrorism in this country. You can't just wish these things away overnight, but nonetheless the failure to achieve anything is extraordinary. The second area, I think, falls within the international community, and I will put this in two ways. We've been very grateful as a group for the openness of ministers, particularly Saeed Abazi, to meet us and to discuss it, and actually partly, I think, at our prompting, she raised this issue with the Pakistan Prime Minister, new Pakistan Prime Minister, at their first meeting in the United Nations. So the government has been responsive. We have engaged, and we're very pleased to engage with officials in different. But I think the two questions we have to ask are these: although these issues are raised, are we really communicating in our diplomatic effort the seriousness of these issues relative to all the other issues that are undoubtedly discussed with the Pakistan authorities? I suspect not. So I suspect we raise the issues but do not drive them home with the determination we should like. And when, for example, we've looked at aid programs and the aid relationship, I can't be absolutely certain, but it would look as though, although there are substantial amounts of British money flowing both to Pakistan bilaterally and through international institutions, significant parts of which go to Pakistan, there would appear to be no certainty at all that any of that reaches the Hazara community in Quetta, and certainly there's very little international presence on the ground. That is significant because the presence of international aid efforts actually becomes a restraining factor in these circumstances on the willingness of terrorist organisations to operate. So we have to continue to press on that. And thirdly, there is the controversial area of funding of these organisations and groups. I'm not an expert in these areas, other people would. We are told that some of the state funding from Gulf states recently is no longer made, but the allegations are certainly there in the media that private individuals continue to fund some of the organisations. This is an area that must be opened up to public discussion, and to the extent that our country has relationships with some of those states, that's got to be part of our relationship there. Because none of us are here tonight to point fingers of blame. We want to explore every possible way of bringing known methods of conflict resolution to bear in this situation. That is enormously important to us as a group and those that we're working with. And so, what I say, I'm not here to make a cheap shot criticism of other people for not doing the right thing, but to say we've got to get the conditions in place where conflict resolution has some chance of success. We have to find a situation where, so far as the Hazara community is concerned, there is a reasonable prospect of living in some peace and some security.
Thank you very much.